Good morning, everyone. Sam and Siddharth make it a hard act to follow, but in many senses, I think they have made my life a little easy. What I'm going to speak to you today is something that's going to be available to each and every one of you. The future really belongs to all of you. We are figments of the past, and at some point in time, not too far in the future, will become memories of the past. But for you, you will be the ones who will be crafting the future for yourself. So that's what I'm really going to talk about. I'm going to talk about this topic called my Futurescape, and that's a word that I coined up. And essentially, this is a mechanism I believe that can help each and every person. When you imagine and create a picture for yourself as the world around you, for you, can eventually become. You imagine a future for yourself. That's what I'm going to talk about. Now, we all know the future is rapidly evolving, and I think if you listen to Siddharth, and he spoke about the fact that the impact that's being made in as far as the oceans is concerned, the impact of geopolitical changes, the role that corporations play, all of them have in some senses taken away the focus to where the problem actually is. But whatever it is, at the end of the day, it is clear the future is rapidly evolving. And it's evolving in such a way that the velocity of change, and it's something that I want you to keep in mind, the velocity of change is becoming increasingly more. I used a double emphasis to let you know that the pace of change is accelerating. And the pace of change is accelerating, and there are figures, there are many examples that can be cited to demonstrate this. But the pace of change is accelerating in such a way that at some point in time, our preparedness to be able to manage the pace of change is beginning to be questioned. Our own habits, our own ways of working have become, in some senses, driven by the change rather than us being the drivers of the change. So it's a big change that we need to get used to. The impact of technology is stronger than ever before, and I think that's something that Siddharth alluded to. Technology is impacting every aspect of our life today, right? Now, whether it's good, whether it's not good, it's a matter of opinion, a matter of discussion, but what cannot be argued that it's deeply impacting our life today. And they are transforming personal and business lives immensely, right? Now, I've been in conversation with the organizers, and I did mention to them right in the beginning that I'm very comfortable with all modes of communication. And after that, a very large majority of the communication that was with me was over WhatsApp. Now just think about this. I belong to the past. I did not know what WhatsApp is or was till a few years back. My life today is, and this happens with a lot of different groups that I'm a part of. My life today, professional and personal, is impacted deeply by WhatsApp. Just one little tiny dot of touch of technology in our everyday life. And that pace is only accelerating. You're going to have a speaker later talk to you about artificial intelligence. AI and machine learning are transforming the world in ways that we have never ever begun to even imagine. You are actually engaging with AI on a daily basis. Your preferences, your tastes, your habits are being tracked, and results are being displayed to you in a manner where your choices are being affected. I'm going to come back to this word called choice a little later. And there are positive sides of AI as well, and machine learning. Dr. Watson, which is IBM Watson, which is a very large machine learning based tool, is today changing the face of medicine in ways that could have never been imagined. Oncology, which is a science that is based on enormous amount of data and enormous amount of change, is just one such area that is being deeply impacted by technologies. In other words, there are challenges of impact of technology, as we heard earlier. There are challenges of impact of technology in our own personal lives, and there are challenges of impact of technology in terms of what can be done to better lives going forward. Internet of Things is the next big deal, right? I have somebody whom I know is actually setting up a new company, whose intent is to make sure that in a home, a patient's ICU is replicated. And the way that they are going to do is by using Internet of Things. By grabbing every piece of information about the patient and aggregating them to make them available in a constructed fashion to the physicians who attend the patient. Obviously, physicians are at a distance. The net result is hospitals obviously then become, the rooms become available. The patient, especially one that requires long-term care, is being able to be with the near and dear ones. The family is able to spend time. The setting is far better than what it was. And therefore, the anxiety of being in a hospital is replaced with familiarity and the positiveness that comes out of familiarity. So think about it. And there are many such examples of Internet of Things. Wearable devices is another area. I gave an example of Internet of Things and wearable devices for patients. There's a whole bunch of other technologies that are critical to the way in which everybody's lives are getting affected. Yes, a small example is that of auto translators. One of the big challenges of engaging with people is language. Language itself is going through a process where when you speak, even if the other person does not understand the language, the automatic translation of the language is being enabled today. In probably 4 to 5 years' time, auto translators are going to become the norm, not being managed by a human translator, but by auto translation. An area that I personally work a lot on is immersive learning. Learning today is, you're all students, you've been impacted by learning on a daily basis, and learning today is a sage on stage speaking to students for the most part. Immersive learning attempts to translate this and move that away from just being a sage on stage to actually make the student as a personal participant in the journey of learning. And the outcome of such immersive learning would be in areas and ways that have not been experienced so far. For example, a very, very tiny example of this is how pilots learn how to fly an airplane. They go through a simulator, they go through immersive learning, they are subjected to situations and scenarios, and their response and their ability to respond to that is graded and improvements are effected. You do that on a daily basis today, right? It's called gaming. You spend a lot of time with the gaming console, and that's a good example of the kind of technology that is behind immersive learning. And therefore, change is profound. The way we consume information, the way we consume experiences, and the way we consume learning, all of them have changed and changed dramatically. Just going back to Siddharth's example again, all of this is impacting everything that we do in and around us and in ourselves as well. First example of that is impact on societies and communities, and the second impact is on belief systems. What we believe is the mantra of success, the definition of success, is beginning to change and change deeply. The manner in which we approach our own designing of lives, our own ability to cast and craft our future is going to be the answer to this. And on top of it is the geopolitical change. You can see for yourself, based on what you can read on a daily basis, the spectacular change that is happening in as far as the response to people, the reaction of people to their own anxieties in terms of the geopolitical situation that exists. What used to be the way in which we viewed humanity is dramatically changing. Just as an example, you've probably read about the shooting in a school in the US a couple of days back. That to me is this tiny little example of the extent to which anxieties are driving people. And this is the reality of the future. So the largest impact is really on the individuals, on each and every one of you. But here is the good news. If you start looking at the future not merely as a world that you are living in, the VUCA world that you're living in. VUCA stands, of course, for volatility, uncertainty, chaos, and ambiguity. If you don't look at it as a VUCA world that you are living in, and you start looking at it as a world full of opportunities, opportunities to make change, opportunities to impact in a manner that is consistent with your personal values and philosophies, then suddenly the whole thing kind of opens up. I come across multiple examples of young people, not so young people, for whom the meaning of relationships, I'm calling them anchor elements, meaning of relationships and families are dramatically different than what they used to be. And this is going to increase. You probably, every one of you in this room, probably have more Facebook friends that you have not met than ever before. And that number keeps increasing every day. You probably engage in a manner which is fantastically different from what it used to be in our time. We grew up in a world of shortages. We have to wait in queues for years to buy a scooter or get a gas connection or a telephone. Years. You may not even believe it. We have almost one telephone for every member of our population today. We have close to 1 billion phones for a population of 1.3 billion in India. When I grew up, the waiting list for a single telephone connection at home was 12 years. The world has dramatically changed, and that has in fact had a very, very profound impact in our engagement with normally what used to be the anchor elements of our life. And given all of that, and I have this quote from a corporate title, "Take control of your destiny or someone else will." He spoke about the destiny of fishermen having to be in the hands of the fishermen. And the same thing is true for every one of you. I'm calling this designing one's future for an ever-changing world. This is based on a simple design principles. The slide itself is not important. Design thinking is something that all of you are familiar with. And I have had a chance to look at and study some work which has been done by 2 Stanford professors. From Bernard and Evans, there are 2 Stanford professors who are well known in the area of design thinking. So here are some basic principles which I have picked up from them and added a few of my own as a simple template for you to think through, to prepare yourself for this future, and not just prepare yourself, to actually design your future as you go along. And it's a continuous design process. What are those elements? Number 1, continue to be intensely curious. I think if there is one thing that will differentiate people from letting the situation affect them to actually managing the scenarios and situation, that is curiosity. The fact that you are sitting today listening to all the speakers and there is a great list is in itself is an example of the fact that curiosity, you're curious about, about hearing what they have to say. You're curious about the areas that they're going to cover. Curiosity is critical for designing your own future. Try things out. One of the most interesting things that was there when we were growing up was that we were less distracted with lots of things. So it gave us enough time to try stuff out. How many of you have flown a kite here before? Have you ever done that? A few. A little more than a few. Fantastic. How many of you do that every year? How many of you have tried new things? Can you say the last 3 months, these are 3 new things that I have tried, completely new things? Hands up. If you 1 or 2. We become prisoners of conformance and of our own habits. And that prevents us from trying things out. And that prevents us from designing our own future. Reframe problems and perspectives. I think to a very large extent, our ability to restate and therefore keep the problems away from personal biases is going to be crucial to designing a future. Recognize it takes time. Everything takes time. It's not a nice thing to really hear, but it takes time. We are in a hurry, all of us. We are young. We want to make changes. We want things to happen now. It takes time. One of the most interesting things that I have noticed is as information becomes open, as information becomes available to everybody, we are overwhelmed with the total amount of information that makes us less open. So more open leads to less open, and you have to be very conscious of it. About a year back, 28th of January, something that happened made me reflect on the greatest gift human beings have, that is the ability to make choices and be accountable for the choices that they make. That is, it's an incredibly important thing. That actually opened up my eyes to an opportunity with which I could design my future starting a year back in a completely different way than what had been happening till then. So designing a future is not a one-time task. It's not meant for the 7th semester of MIT. It's something that you do on a continuous basis. And those choices that I made and the choices based on which the designing of my future, just listen to Sam, what he talked about earlier. Every single day, he probably, had an opportunity to go through some experience, some impact that probably had to make him change the design of his life, and he did it so successfully. To me, this understanding that the choices are with us, the options are plenty, we make the choice, I think is going to be critical to designing of the future. And finally, as artificial intelligence comes in, as machine learning comes in, probabilities, which constituted a large majority of the work that people did outside in their careers after they graduated from the portals of university, are going to be in fact taken over by machines. And it's a good thing. AI will tell you what is the probability that this trade will be successful. You used to build mathematical models for that before. A lot of our work was in probability. And I'm saying you can make a choice and design your future which is based on possibilities, incredible possibilities, and create therefore a purpose-filled design for yourself. I'll close by just quoting Alan Kay, and I love this quote because it says that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Let me paraphrase that. The best way to predict your future is to design it. Design it, be joyful, be happy, and all the best. Thank you.